Good evening, everyone, or good afternoon, or even good morning, depending on where you're watching us from. It is your girl, Marcie Thomas, founder of BGC Book Club, Live Well Sister, and of course, Brown Girl Collective, who is the mother of them all. So, welcome to this space. I am really excited to be here again, and thank you to everyone who has already joined us. And I know that you're going to be in for a real treat tonight with the conversation that we're having. So if this is your first time here, please feel free to drop in the comments that you're a first time guest, where you're joining us from, or anything that you would love to share. I am actually coming to you from the outskirts of ATL, Georgia, where it is super hot today. So I am enjoying having a chance to be inside and talk about a really great book. Now, our guest has some other exciting things going on this evening, so I am not going to delay so that we can actually have time to really get into the conversation. But I would suggest you go ahead and share it out and let people know that we are about to talk about a recipe for more. Let me make sure that lighting is correct. A recipe for more by our special guest, Sara Elise. Now, Sara is a multidisciplinary creative, splitting her time between Brooklyn and upstate New York. She is the co-founder and designer of Apogeo Collective, a hospitality experience centering QTPOC, as well as the founder of Harvest and Revel, a sustainable event catering and design company. As an autistic, Black, and Indigenous femme, she spends much of her thought space contemplating pleasure and pain, collective joy and healing, otherness, embodiment, remembering and reclaiming, self-destruction and growth, and how inextricably those concepts are all linked. So without any further delay, let's welcome Sara Elise. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I am super excited to have you here. As we had a few moments to talk beforehand, and I have shared with the audience, I really am looking forward to diving into this conversation. So your life and your career trajectory has been quite interesting, that has led you to writing this first book. So congratulations, first of all, on your first book. First of many, I am sure.
Hopefully. But also, who knows? Who knows where my life will take me?
Right, so. Right. That's very true. So tell us a little bit about, your career trajectory, how you started out, doing things, I guess, a lot in a way that a lot of people would say is traditional, but then you decided to branch out and do what you felt like was going to be best for you instead.
Yeah. Well, firstly, I want to thank you for everything that you've created that's allowed me to even be in this space talking with you. So thank you. And also for having me on your show. Secondly, I do want to say that I am sometimes getting a little bit of a lag. So if I take a moment to respond or anything like that, I'm just processing and trying to hear. But I believe you asked what in my career got me to the point of basically throwing it
all that away and doing something different.
Yeah. So, I basically just was on this path, which I think a lot of Black women in particular are on, where I'm following what everyone has told me to do. So I'm listening to my parents, listening to the church, listening to society, all this input in my life. And I never actually considered myself what I wanted to do if I was happy or if I felt whole, or if I felt fulfilled. So I was on this path. I went to business school. I made it to Wall Street. I thought that was like the number one. If you're a business person, you're going to get to Wall Street. That's the number one thing. And once I was working at a Wall Street firm, I just realized how I had never asked those questions of myself and never questioned the path that I was being told to want. And so in that questioning, and also realizing that I was so wildly depressed and self-destructive, in that path and in the questioning, I realized that I needed to make a major life pivot in order to start taking care of myself and choosing rest and choosing things that I'd never been encouraged to choose for myself before. So yeah, I think it was that questioning that really led to the major pivot that then kind of started off this entirely different life that I never imagined for myself.
I really think that that's powerful, Sarah, because so many of us go on a path that sometimes is not the path we even want to be on, but we're on it anyway, and we're miserable on that path. We're doing the things that society, or like you said, the church, our family, whomever is telling us what they think that we should do. And sometimes even we internalize because of, capitalism and patriarchy, all these other things. We internalize that in order to be happy, we think that happiness or success is supposed to show up in a certain way. So
Right.
I applaud you. Yes. And discovering that at a young age.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. I think, there's so much messaging all the time. Like you said, it's hard to kind of cut through the noise of everything that we're being told to do, especially as Black women and femmes. We're being told all the time to be respectful, you have to work this hard to be valued. You have to have this type of output to be valued in society. And it's just, it's not true.
Not true. Now, you have multiple identities, as many of us do. We are multifaceted human beings. But one of the things I love about your book and all of the work that you do, that you fully embrace the multiple aspects of your identity and how they all kind of come together and mold together as a part of your story, as a part of you, creating a recipe for more for your own life. So how do you feel that your unique perspective has led you to want to go on this path and then also encourage the rest of us to do the same?
Yeah, I think and this is a constant journey, right? It's not just like, oh, I learned about myself in this static way, and now I have everything figured out and now my life path is clear. It's more like, as I'm growing, I'm learning more, and I'm figuring out how to best integrate the things that I'm learning so that I can feel more whole and more grounded in myself, right? And feel more authentic. Like, how do I keep showing up more authentically? And how do I keep showing up in a way that encourages and embraces all parts of me? So when I was working on Wall Street, I'm not really ever a hidden person, but it's a white boys club.
Right.
Even in the food industry, it's a white boys club. So I'm surrounding myself with people who are making microaggressions all the time, or dumb all the time. And I was just like, why am I fighting so hard to be in spaces that don't actually appreciate and value all of me just for being me? It's like I have to suppress or minimize different aspects of myself in order to fit in, or like get the promotion or get on the team so that I can be a good fit with all of these people who I don't fit with. Why would I try to fight with these people that literally the whole system of Wall Street is like set up that it doesn't support any of my communities. But I think my autistic identity and getting that diagnosis and realizing just so much more, getting so much more language once I got that diagnosis has really helped me to just question everything. It go even deeper than I'd ever gone before, just thinking about the different things that I need to feel comfortable in a space that I've always minimized. And I think these are lessons that everyone, especially Black women, can really take away. Like, we don't even consider what we need in a space. It either works or we make it work, right? We're constantly stretching ourselves to make other people comfortable. And I think getting the language for that diagnosis really helped break a lot of things down for me, and highlighted a lot of ways that I was even, and still to this day, because it's a constant work in progress, being ableist towards myself, and just figuring out how to step away from that as well. So yeah, I think, and that's an argument I make in the book, like you said, just figuring out how we identify and figuring out how we can create external spaces, but also spaces internally to embrace our fullest selves and get to know ourselves better.
Yes, I love that because, yeah, we are very complex individuals, and we need to pay more attention to those things that make us such, and be able to, as you say, have safe spaces where we can walk in the fullness of all of that. Because in the fullness of that is where that joy and all those other things come into play. So you are a pleasure doula. Now, for somebody who doesn't know what in the world is a pleasure doula, tell us a little bit about what you do in that capacity specifically.
Yeah, so I didn't even know what a pleasure doula was. I don't really think it's even a thing. I think it's I was talking with a friend once, and we were, probably over several conversations, but trying to figure out, I have my hands in so many pots, and basically I create, with all of the work that I do, I create spaces externally or internally for people to learn about themselves, discover more about themselves, explore. And ultimately, I think a lot of those spaces and a lot of that work has to do with pleasure, whether it's with the catering company and helping my clients access more healthful pleasure and celebration through food, whether it's through Apaheo Collective, like you mentioned, which is a bed and breakfast hospitality project that centers queer and trans people of color. It's all about rest and luxuriating and rejuvenation and pleasure. Whether it's about my book, A Recipe for More, that's, there's so much pleasure in that. So I think we were kind of just talking, and my friend Gio actually coined the term. She was like, you know what you are? You're a pleasure doula. And as I started to think about that and sit with that, I was like, I think you're right. Because when I think of a doula is someone who typically is hired before, during, or after a pregnancy. When we think of doula in the traditional sense, and they provide wisdom and guidance to the parent or parents who are birthing this human into the world. And I think that's kind of how I think about pleasure. It's such an intense experience. And yeah, I think of myself as someone who creates these spaces, and also I work with different coaching clients to really help folks dive in deep and figure out how to access this pleasure for themselves, or how to birth this pleasure that's within them into their life, into the world.
Yes, because it is definitely a birthright. We're going to get into it a little bit more, but I want the tagline for the book, of course, it's A Recipe for More, Ingredients for a Life of Abundance and Ease. So abundance means different things to different people. What does it mean for you?
Yeah, I think abundance for me means, well, firstly, I want to say, and I also do mention this in the book, I think a lot of people, when they think of abundance, think that it's just financial. Mm-hmm. And I think for me, it's such a small, the financial abundance is great, but it's such a small part of it. And I think when I think of abundance, I think of, like you said, something that's our birthright, especially as Black and Indigenous people. Like, our ancestors have been doing this abundance game.
Right.
Like they knew what was up more than we know what's up with regard to abundance. I think of not just thriving or not just surviving in my life, but actually thriving. So an abundant life for me looks like a life where I'm not just in the minutia of the day-to-day rituals, kind of numb to creativity and numb to inspiration, but really thriving in my life and getting to experience the fullness of my life and the fullness of who I am. And then, yeah. And then did you ask about ease, or is that
I
next?
didn't, but you can tell us.
Okay. When I think of ease, I think of, and I mentioned this the other day when I was talking to someone too, but I think of what I experience and what I've learned from Buddhist meditation techniques, where when I'm meditating, my mind's not blank. I have so many racing thoughts, so much anxiety. You can't just, some people can, props to them. I can't just shut it off. And now I'm just like this Zen meditation master. It doesn't work that way. I still have all these racing thoughts, but what I've learned is that I shouldn't be trying to control them. And instead I should be allowing them to flow through me. And I think them, they flow through me. I'm present to them, but then they leave with ease. And that's what I think ease is how do I live my life, not trying to control every single outcome, but being present to things as they're presented to me and not putting a bottleneck on them. So not trying to constrain or constrict myself or my life, and just allowing it to flow easily.
I love it. I love it. But yeah, because ease is something that we think that we can't have, because especially as Black women, people in the LGBTQIA plus community. There's a lot of letters. I get it right. I fumbled there for a second. But just in certain communities, there are so many things that want to make our lives hard. Mm-hmm. Whether it's systems or people that seek to make our lives hard. And so this is what I love so much in reading your book, is that you are basically telling us it doesn't have to be. We know that there are the things that we don't have ultimate control over, but there are the things that come from within that we can take more of an active role in finding that abundance and finding that ease, apart from what somebody else is telling us it should be. So that's what I love about the book.
Thank you.
Yes, but we won't have time to get into all of them, but it's broken down into chapters. We'll talk a little bit about more than others, but because it is a recipe for more, you have different ingredients that go into what it means. The first, and mommy, don't get mad at me because I'm going to use a cuss word. My mom always watches. First is fuck being busy, and that applies to you too, mommy, because you like to be busy. Investing in your pleasure, questioning everything, letting yourself be visible, getting used to feeling good, choosing who you want to be, use your fear and your rage, and to queer your friendships. And I loved the way all of these things were broken down. And I know a lot of people are probably like, what in the world does queer your friendships mean? But we'll get to it. So I want to start with the F being busy. That's real. Talk about what that means to you.
Yeah, I think our culture has an addiction to busyness, especially in New York. There's just countless things all the time, but even more separately than social engagements, which are hopefully you're agreeing to because you actually want to go and experience them. But I think even just more specifically with work, I had this idea that my level of success was directly correlated to how hard I worked or how often I worked. And now I can just see that that's further from the truth. And, it's also something that I've noticed culturally. I think a lot of rich white people that I've observed, generational, like they have this generational knowledge that's been passed down to them. They don't really get that messed up. Like a lot of them don't equate working often to making a lot of money, or like having a really hard, busy job to making a lot of money. Like they're just like, I'm deserving of all this money, and I don't necessarily like those things just don't correlate for them. And so it's just been an interesting thing for me to observe the contrast in our communities versus their communities. And then also kind of just step away from this toxic addiction to busyness as it relates to my self-value and self-importance and which is my ego. And yeah, now that I've done that, so much has changed in my life. And I talk about that a lot in the book. I was working 80 to 100-hour weeks. And now I would say that I think in the book, when I was writing the book, I said I worked around 6 or 7 hours a week.
Wow.
And I just prioritize rest in a completely different way. And I have my schedule open to allow for things that I might be interested in, new creative projects to come and flow. I close doors with work environments when they don't work for me. I say no to a lot of things. And the more I say no to, I realize actually, and I talk about this as well, but I realize that it actually creates so much more room for all of these things that actually feel really well aligned for me. Because at first, which I think has to do with the addiction to busy, I was getting confused, and I thought that if I said no to things, then that would somehow constrict my energy or like block my abundant blessings, when really saying no to the things that aren't really perfectly aligned for me has actually opened so many doors that I have just received so much more abundance and blessings than I could have even thought of. So yeah, I think that's what that means for me.
Yes, I just, as you were talking, and even as I was reading, just thinking about the fact that we do run around, we do a lot. And as Black women, Black people, the thing is that, oh, well, you got to work twice as hard or 3 times as hard and still be making less money, which is crazy. To think about that.
It's a scam.
It's a scam. It's a scam, because historically in this country, we've always had to break our backs to get oftentimes little to nothing for the labor. And even if we are in situations where we're making a lot of money, is the reward worth the sacrifice? Something to think about.
And also because we're so addicted to it, which again, I would argue isn't our fault. It's the messaging that we've been receiving our whole lives. But even because of that, then once we get to this idea of success, or we get to this plateau, or like we made it up the hill, we still then will overschedule ourselves, or like we're still addicted to this idea that busy means valued. Mm-hmm. So when people are like, hey, have you been? It's like, oh, I've been so busy. I'm doing so many. And it's like, okay, well, what about that story is holding you back? Like, what if we question that and deconstruct this self-narrative a little bit? Like, what's deeper there? That's what I'm curious about.
Yes. And the other thing, and then I'll move on to the next thing, but the other thing in what you said is that you were working so much less. And that's a lesson that I'm going to take even for myself, because the reason why you work less is because you're in your purpose. You're doing what you're supposed to do, and people are rewarding you for the work that you do. So you're in your sweet spot, doing what you're supposed to do. Yeah. And your needs are being met. You don't have to do all these crazy things to have your needs met, things that may not even be where you're supposed to be. You can be in your right place, in your right space, and that abundance is going to come to you. So that's the other piece of that. Forget all that running around. And of course, these are things to aspire to. Nobody's saying go quit your job or nothing crazy. They're things to aspire to, but just, to understand that, sometimes the blessings will find you when you're in the right place, doing the right things for the right reasons.
Right. Yeah. I really, and have to remind myself of this often, but I really deeply believe that the blessings that are made for me will come to me. And that doesn't mean that I'm like laying in bed and like, I'm just not going to do anything and be on social media all day and the blessings will come to me.
No.
I think that it's said, like being grounded in my purpose and trying to figure and feel my way in that as I'm growing. That's the way that the blessings will come to me. Saying no to all this busyness, like you said, running around, having a lot of energy that's dispersed and divided. I feel like that's a blessing blocker versus, focusing my energy, having discernment, saying yes when I mean it. Those are the things that allow my blessings to come to me.
Absolutely. Now, I want to get into investing in your pleasure because, of course, you are a pleasure doula. And by pleasure, you are not talking about sex, because people automatically, when they hear pleasure, a lot of people go to sex, and we know that it's not just that. But pleasure, that's a part of it, but it's not the only part of it. So what do you mean by investing in our pleasure?
Yeah, I think, again, like abundance and ease, pleasure, especially for Black and Indigenous cultures, is something that we've been taught to kind of parcel off. Like we have to pay for our pleasure with work, with busyness. And it's just not true. Again, it's a scam. So when I think of investing in pleasure, I think of what are ways in my day-to-day life that I can really enhance my life by making it pleasurable. So it could be small things, getting yourself flowers and smelling the flowers in your home. Just like really small ways to change your life and get your brain. And I talk a lot about neuroplasticity and kind of rewiring your brain, but rewiring your brain through small acts of your life to really realize that you're deserving of pleasure in all forms. Sex, flowers, food, whatever you want. It's all yours. You just have to choose it and let it in. And it has to be an intentional choice, and you have to make space for it. And so that's why I talk about investing, right? Because it might not feel natural. It might not feel natural at first, or it might feel like there's a cost associated to it at first, but the end result is just abundant.
Yes. And one of the things I like that you talked about, and I was like, oh, she's really speaking to me in this, is that you talked about like enjoying the textures of life. Like whether it's the textures in the food that you're eating, or like I was telling my mother the other day, I am a texture person. It's like sitting behind me, it actually fell on the floor, but I have like this blanket that has a certain texture. When I have decorated my bedroom, I have different textures in it because I like to feel different things against my skin, not always the same thing. Or when I eat food, I love food that has layers and complex flavors and stuff like that, because for me, that's a part of the sensory or sensual pleasure, the sight, sound, taste, touch, all of the things that I hear. I'm always looking for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that. That's exactly what it's about, is just like paying attention to all the ways that your life can be infused with pleasure. I love soft, tactile things. Like you have a hide right here. Mm-hmm. I love soft things around me. And as an autistic person, tactile things are so important to me feeling safe. So yeah, I love that. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Right. I think that is really powerful. And when I read that, I'm like, yes, that's me. I love that kind of stuff. Now, this is another big one that really stood out to me as a Black woman, Black femme. Let yourself be visible. it's so easy for us to hide, or for people to make us think that we need to hide, that we shouldn't show up as our full, authentic, whole, beautiful selves. So let's talk a little bit about that. What do you mean by letting yourself be visible?
Yeah, I think I mean exactly that. Like, how do we learn about ourselves? And that also goes back to our conversation about identities. How do we learn more about ourselves to uh, understand and give ourselves permission to be that fullest self that we've learned about in the world? Because, we're not, our hiding, and I think Audre Lorde says this, but our hiding is, I'm paraphrasing, our
Right.
hiding is not gonna save us. We're
Right.
not, even though we think, oh, we must hide because we're fearful for many reasons that make complete sense. So we must hide to stay safe. The hiding will actually not keep us safe. So then, if that's true, why don't we just think about it in the other extreme and think about, okay, if we're not going to be safe regardless, then why not just be the fullest version of ourselves that we can be? And so that's how I think about it. And I think also, a lot of us spend so much energy too minimizing
Mhm.
ourselves for other people's comfort. And so if we just stop doing that, how much more energy would we have to give to ourselves, the people we love, the events that we want to say yes to, that we now have time for because we said no to other things? It's just,
Right, that part.
it's all interconnected.
Yes, yes. And it's just something because, and this is just a true confession. What I'm doing now, I mean, I've been doing these videos and, interviews and things like that since 2020 is when I started doing it. But Brown Girl Collective has actually been around since 2009. But there was a part of me that was easy to post and talk about other women and great stuff that they're doing and history and all those things. That was easy because it was just me getting information and resharing it. It wasn't so easy to say, okay, now I'm going to show up on screen and talk to people, and, someone who's not formally trained in doing this, or, things that I might feel about how, I show up in the world in all of my different, identities, that sometimes it's hard, but at a certain point, it's like, you know what? I know that I have value to add, and I know that I have something that other people can, benefit, like you being here, that you can come and tell your stories and share, and, just be another platform that say, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and do it and stop hiding.
Yeah, no, I love that, and I wish everyone followed your lead.
Yeah.
I think the world would be, that's like what our the point is, right? That's our purpose. And the way that we connect with other people is when, like, we don't connect with people who we're like, oh, I'm idolizing them. It's a different thing.
Right.
And I think our culture has gotten, with celebrity culture and stuff like that, which I've never understood, but people have this idea of like, oh, I idolize this person, so I'm connected to them. That's not a connection. You don't know them. But I think we have the connection, and the real stuff is when people like you create these types of spaces and actually are vulnerable and come on and share their stories, and like, so someone who's listening is going to connect to something you said, and that's the thing that's going to provide a little bit of hope or a little bit of encouragement or motivation to change something positively in their life. Like, those are the moments that matter. And so I wish everyone, especially with social media, just moved more away from like, this is the perfect, version of
Mhm.
me, which no one cares, right?
Right.
Because it's made up, it's not real. And
Right.
instead, like, this is actually who I am. Do you want to connect?
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Which kind of goes into the next thing. And you talked a little bit about the neuroscience a minute ago, but choosing who you want to be. I really love this chapter because there are so many people who feel like they can't choose who they want to be. But you say that people can make different choices. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that it's about choosing when your head, and this is the important part to distinguish, but when your own mind, because of your messaging or because of your family or whatever, is creating this narrative for you that is oppressive. So when your mind is acting as your main oppressor, how do you get away from that? How do you clear the fog to see clearly? And I think ultimately, all of us, unless you're in a really horrible circumstance like slavery or indentured service, some horrible circumstance where you literally physically don't have control over your life. If you're not in that, you actually probably likely do have a choice to make, and the choice is very difficult. And it's very difficult to figure out how to choose yourself when you have all these other voices that are projecting things onto you and projecting narratives onto you that you then are like, oh, is this me? I don't know. This is what this person keeps telling me I am. This is what society tells me Black women are. So I guess this is what I'm performing. But yeah, once we pull all that away, just figuring out what it is we actually want for ourselves and then choosing that, investing in that, and adjusting our life to look like one that feels aligned with our desires.
And not that you can't change just because.
Yeah. I think that, yeah, I think it's particularly tough. I've only grown up in a Black family, so I can't
Right.
speak to any other cultures, but I think when you have a close knit, or not even necessarily close knit, but a family that has a lot of input in the way that things should be for your life, I think it's sometimes often hard to cut through the noise. But yeah, the end of the day, we don't owe anyone anything. It's our life. It's my individual life to ruin, to to do
Right.
whatever I want with it. It's just mine, and the choices come down to me. So yeah, I think at the end of the day, remembering that we don't owe anyone anything unless we consent to that
Right.
type of relationship.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. That was a really powerful one for me because we all know people. Like I know people. It's like, girl, why are you still da da da? But then it's like they don't understand that they have the power to make change. So I mean, I just thought that was really important and powerful to understand. And one thing that you said that kills the myth, because people are like, oh, you can change anything or create a new habit in 21 days. No, not necessarily so.
No, and it's also different for everyone. But
Right.
I think, if you're complaining about the same thing all the time, then at the end of the day, it's like, what are you going to do to change it? Or is the complaining just part of this like victim self narrative that you've built and keep telling people and telling yourself so that you don't have to take responsibility, or because the change fear that feels too
Yeah.
scary? So
Right.
just like questioning that and figuring out what's holding us back.
Right. Well, we don't have a lot of time left because I'm respectful of the fact you told me you had something to do.
Thank
So,
you.
like, briefly, I mentioned it earlier, queer your friendships, which isn't probably what people think that means. But I love what you talk about in that chapter, real briefly, just to give a little snippet. And if you all want to know more, you got to go pick up a copy of the book. How about
Um,
that?
yes. And I think queering friendships is was one of the last chapters of the book, because I think it really does a good job of summing up a lot of things that I talk about, which deeply have to do with questioning. Like we've already talked about so much today. Questioning your life and figuring out how to create systems and structures that support you in a way that might be out of what you have traditionally thought support looked like. And so queering my friendships for me was about, I had a very strong separation of like, this is what my partner does. This is what my friends do. These are the types of things I like, vacations I'd go on or traveling with my friends. This is what I would do with my partner. I had all these distinctions. And even in the ways that I would allow people to show up for me, like, oh, my partner can see me when I'm really upset, but like my friends need to see me when I'm pulled together because, and so I think just questioning all of that and breaking all of that down and figuring out that I can have a relationship with my friends that is reciprocal and deeply vulnerable. And I just never realized that. And I also can have a romantic relationship with my friends. And that doesn't mean I'm having sex with any of my friends because that's not what romance means. But I go out to dinner with my friends. We buy each other gifts. We share our calendars. We family plan together. We talk about where we're each going to live. We make commitments to each other. And that is just that level of friendship I didn't know existed. And it's been one of the most beautiful gifts for my life. So I just wanted to share it with everyone.
And I appreciate you for doing that because I often tell people in my life, I'm looking for my tribe. Yeah. And when I say that, what you described is what I mean. Is what I mean, because romance, it can come and go, romantic partners, it can come and go. But that tribe, those people who are really down for you no matter what, that's very powerful. Well, I do want to thank you so much for coming on this evening to share a recipe for more. Just real quickly, is there any place that you're going to be anytime soon? Or I have like your Instagram website and stuff like that. They've been scrolling, but is there anything specifically that we can support you in the days ahead?
Yes, I'm going to be doing an event in Brooklyn at Kula Yoga Project, which is this beautiful studio space with Jay Wortham and Tara Ora. We're going to be doing, it's called Invest in Your Pleasure, which is exactly what we were just talking about. And we're going to be doing a really juicy sound bath meditation and a cacao tasting ritual. So that'll be great. Tickets are on my website, also on my Instagram. And then later this month, for Pride Month, I'm going to be talking with Jez Chung at P&T Knitwear, a bookstore in Lower East Side. And we're going to be talking all about queering your friendship. So if that sparked your interest, you can come through to that event. But yeah, I have 2 more book events this month, and then to celebrate the release, which was last month, the finalizing my book tour. But then I also just got booked for an LA event. So we're adding that on to the book tour, and I'm going to be doing that October 13th at Salt Eaters Bookstore in LA. So
all right,
very exciting things. Yeah.
So everybody, follow the different places that Sara has mentioned. They've been scrolling, as I said. Pick up a copy of the book and read it, dive into it, learn from it, see yourself in it, see the changes that you can do for yourself within it. And yes, please do
I'm
that.
Gonna take a little picture of you holding up my book.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, I got a good light now. It's not glared, so...
All right. Well, thank you so much for
having
me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So I'll let you go ahead so you can go enjoy your event. And, hopefully this will not be the last time. Even if it's not a book, I would love to just vibe with you sometime. Just have a conversation.
Likewise.
Yeah. All right. Well, you have a good one.
See you soon.
All right. Bye-bye. Yes, I really enjoyed Sara. I enjoyed having the opportunity to read her book and just to learn more about a recipe for more and what that means and what her take on that concept is. So thank you all for joining us. As you know, because she had something to do, we cut it a little bit shorter than we normally would be, but you know, we always want to be respectful of our guests and the wonderful things that they have going on. So just by means of what's next. Next week, our guest will be, I'm going to put it up so you can see it. We'll actually be talking about money next week, or a little bit of money, but some other things that have to do with abundance as well, which is holistic wealth with Keisha Blair. She will be our guest on next week, June the 14th. And, you know, we look forward to talking to her as well, just to, you know, find out what her process and concept is all about as we continue to build and grow and come up with a variety of tools in our toolbox that help us learn how to indeed live well, as the show is called. So once again, thank you everyone for watching. If you have an opportunity to share this out with others, please feel free to do so, because the more people who join us, the merrier, the more people who can get these messages and learn about the great Black women writers and, you know, their stories, their information. It's just better for each and every one of us individually and collectively. So we look forward to seeing you again next week for Keisha Blair. And until then, please continue to live well. Oh, and one more thing. If you are on the East Coast and are near where all the things are going on with the air quality, please take care of yourselves. Please do that. You know, wear your mask, you know, whatever it is you needed to do. Oh, we have a comment here from Phil. I'm intrigued. I've definitely began to queer my friendships, really reevaluating what I expect from relationships across the board. The standards were different platonically and romantically. Now, not so much. There must be love here. And you know what? I got a couple minutes. You are so right about that, because oftentimes I have said that, you know, I want to marry my best friend. But yet the people I was dating weren't best friend quality. Keeping it real. They weren't always best friend quality. And so, you know, or I'd say, you know, I'll tell all my stories and all my secrets to my best friend. And maybe that person that I'm dating, I'm not telling all my stories and my secrets to. So yes, it definitely, the concepts that she's talking about, and just being open to thinking of things differently, and, you know, really realizing what it is that we want, what we need, and coming, you know, I like that. Yeah, they weren't friendly. Yeah, it's like it's an attraction that may be based on, you know, sensuality, sexuality, whatever the case may be, but that doesn't always make for the best partner. So yes, we have to begin to really think about who we're allowing into our lives, why we're allowing them into our lives, why are we in intimate relationships where we have to hide within those relationships. All those sorts of things are so important. And so people like Sara and her book and some of the other folks that I love to bring into this space just help us to kind of think about that and navigate those thoughts and ideas for ourselves in a way that we can, you know, live better and be happier and more abundant and joyful and all those wonderful things. So thank you all for your comments, even at the end. I appreciate you and really do look forward to seeing you again real soon. If you aren't following or subscribe on YouTube, please subscribe to the Brown Girl Collective YouTube channel, because that will give you the opportunity to see all of the events or interviews I've done over the past few years. I believe there are over 100 interviews on that channel right now. So please feel free to follow there, to subscribe, so you can be first to know what's going on here with Brown Girl Collective. So thanks again to everyone. Thank you for your time and your energy and your love. And please, in the meantime, between time, until I see you again, please continue to live well. Take care. Bye-bye.